this is Rick from Monk's Motors here in Waterford, Michigan, and today we are going to be replacing the sunroof gears in a Porsche 944. The model that we're working on today is a 1986 944S. So we're going to be replacing the two gears that are up in the B-pillar right behind the sunroof that commonly breaks on these vehicles. Up underneath here, there's two clips. You just gotta pull those forward on both sides, passenger and driver's side. 1982 or 83 here in the United States. Up to early 1985 had a different style locking mechanism for the sunroof. We're just going to remove the sunroof. Just setting it off to the side. Okay, another thing we're going to do is before we access the gear system there, we're going to pull this cover off so we can access the motor for the sunroof. Usually there's a screw down here. Some of them people remove the little stop. So this one's already been removed. So these clips, they just pop right out. And there's usually 4 of them along the top here, and they do break. I'm just going to pull that out of the way so we have access to the motor here. And there is a tool on some of them that you can turn the motor so you can access the sunroof manually if something happens. So if you ever do that, make sure you always disconnect the power to the motor, because if you do crank it, it will automatically spin around once it hits the micro switch, and it can take off a finger. We don't want that. Okay, what I'm going to do now is what I like to do personally is set the sunroof lever to the sunroof off position. So I'm going to turn the key on. We're going to position the sunroof up. The levers are not working, so I'm going to close it down until the micro switch turns off the motor. And then I'm going to go ahead, turn the key off, turn it back on to accessory, and then I'm going to go one more step with the up button, and it should drop the arms down the rest of the way, and then it's in the lowered position. Okay, the next step what we're going to do is you have your header trim right here. There's this one's already missing a screw. This one, the vinyl, the glue is worn off, so it's peeling. So we at this time, this is probably a good time if it's doing this, is to re-glue it to the header board. You know, you use a flathead screwdriver or pick tool. There's these little plastic covers. You go over the screws. Some of them may be missing on yours. That's just a cover just to hide the Phillips screws. And I already got the covers off on this one here, so the next thing to do is to take off your Phillips screws. Make sure to place them in an area where you don't lose them, kick them around or anything. Sometimes the washers may stick to the vinyl. Just keep an eye on them. You can always use your pick tool. There's a washer up in there. You can always pick the washer right on out of there so you don't lose them. Just pull the trim panel right on off. Now you have another vinyl coating up underneath here. which you're going to want to, you know, pull out of the way so you can access these housings right here. And these housing is that house the gears for the lifts for the sunroof. So you really don't have to take the whole housing off. There's just a few screws right in the housing here. You can pull that off. The line runs right through from one side to the other, and that's where your the cable goes through, and that's where the teeth of the gears connect to. Okay, I have already pulled back the molding and, you know, loosen up the vinyl that's covering the housing right here. I got my flashlight. You can kind of see what the housing look like. And the Phillips screws are the screws that you will be taking off on these housings here. The other Allen head ones, that mounts the complete housing to the body itself. I've noticed on this one here, that the housing is cracked and broke here. And I believe the only way you can purchase this is you have to purchase the whole entire assembly here. Unless there's a good junkyard in the area that can sell you used parts. These should be readable at some of these junkyards if they have 944s.
Go ahead.
Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start removing the Phillips screws from the cap on the housing. And right here with this little round nub here, that's where part of the gear goes in. That's what holds it in place. And if your sunroof does not go up or down, or it only goes up part way and it stops and it sounds like it's skipping or something, more or less likely it is the teeth on the gear that are bad. So I'm going to drop the housing down, and as you can see, these are the teeth for the gear right there. All these little teeth. And right up in here is the teeth, or the gear itself. That's the lifter mechanism. You can see the teeth still stuck in there. I can pull the teeth right on out of there. And right up in here you can see you may need a screwdriver or pliers. Let me grab a pair of pliers here really quick. I got a pair of channel locks here, but any pliers will work. You can just kind of just pull the gear out. And there is these little washers in here, both top and bottom. So you got to make sure you put them in there. So, and that's what that's a bearing itself. So make sure when you put these back in that you're going to grease them up nicely, and that way there they move, because here's right here is the cable, but it's like on a there's a spring on it. So the spring actually works as part of the gear teeth that actually run right on the teeth here. It's kind of like the rack and pinion type gearing system. So you got your pinion gear and you got your rack gear. So, and this is your rack gear right here. Okay, here's the old gear. It still has the shim on this side here. The other side, I just have it pulled off. This is the new gear. Doesn't look much different. A lot cleaner, a lot nicer. I wish they would make them in metal so we wouldn't have had this issue, but the purpose why they make them in plastic is so they can break away, and that way there's no damage done to the cable or the motor system. They're fairly inexpensive, anywhere from $7 up to about $15, depending on where you purchase them online. Some of the local Porsche shops do carry them. Monk's Motors here in Waterford, we do carry these in stock. If not, we can order them right away, but we do have a few of these in stock. So what we're going to do now, I just took the one shim off. I'm using red synthetic grease. I'm going to put the shim on here because that acts like a bearing. Grease it up. I like to, you know, put grease on the gears. It gets a little messy. You don't need that much grease, but a little bit of grease here and there goes a long way. Now you gotta, there's the hole right there. You gotta kind of get that right up in place so the teeth line right up with the spring gear that's on the cable itself, or also called the rack. And the other bushing are stainless steel. They go right up like that. A little bit of grease. I like to put a little bit of grease right on the slide here. Right down in the hole here. And then you're gonna make sure you clean this off. Make sure there's no teeth stuck in the, and you know, this is a metal gear right here. So and it'll only go in one way, but you kind of want to make sure you get, the way I set it up, I always set it up where it's at the bottom point. So I have a reference point to work off of. And just take the new panel, put it right back up in place. Screw right back up in place here. There's several screws that you have to do this with. You don't want to over tighten these. You just want it till it's tight, good and snug, because if you over tighten these, you can break the housing or cause the gear to bind up, and which you don't want either. So just a good, nice, firm snug on each of these. The process for the other side is identical to this one here, and we will show that in a moment. Okay, I have already removed the other side. Like I said, the housing is broken on this side here. The client that owns this vehicle, he'll be purchasing another housing here, but for today's purpose only, I'm going to use this as a demonstration piece so we can get the sunroof back up and working again. This one here, actually, the whole entire gear itself broke right off from the main gear. So the main gear is up in here, and let's see if I can get that out of here. Which I probably won't be able to do. We'll give it a try. There we go, we got it, see? And the gear is broken right off of this here. There's another set of gears right in there, so. So what we need to do, we're going to go ahead, we'll clean up all the gears and everything out of here. We'll get this all cleaned up, and we'll be ready. Okay, now we're ready to put the other gear in. Like I said, the housing is broke. So this is going to be another tear apart, but right now we're just putting it together just so we can demonstrate how this all works. And I'm greasing everything up with red synthetic grease. Put the shim bushings right in place. What's nice about using grease, it holds the shims right in place. You just fit that right up into the socket right there. Make sure the gears are locked in place. Sometimes you may have to pull it out and readjust it if the arm itself don't fit right where you want it to fit. So you take the shim out of here so I can right in place. There we go. It's in place. Put that shim right back there. A little bit of grease right on the housing, right in the hole. And then we'll screw it right into place. Like I said, do not over tighten them, you'll break the housing, or pinch down on the gearing. Well, you don't want that, you just want to make sure it's nice and snug. Okay, now we're ready to test the system. I have the screws in place. I had the lifter arms, they're in place. They're bottomed out where they need to be. Just gonna make sure that the clutch, there is a clutch on the motor itself that may need adjusting, because if it does it again and strips the gear, you may have to adjust the micro switches or the clutch on the motor. Adjusting the clutch is just loosening up a couple 13mm nuts. Okay, now we're going to give this a try and see what happens. I'm going to turn the key on. There's a micro switch right up in here. So it's not going to activate this here, because if the sunroof is out, it's not going to work with the switch. So you got to push this micro switch in. So here we go. With the 944s, these buttons are a little bit backwards, so you push up to go down and down to go up. So here we go, we're going to push down to go up, and here we go, we're going up, we're up, in place. Okay, now we're going to go down. That should be in the lock position to lock the roof down. And now in order to get to go to the open position on some of these vehicles, you turn the key off, turn the key to the first click, which is accessory, and then you push down on the button, and it should go into the release the sunroof. So now we're going to go ahead, we'll take our vinyl right here and our trim, and we're going to start putting this stuff right back in place. So everything's right back in order. Once we get all this back in, then we're going to put the cover back on, put the rest of it back together, and that pretty much takes care of doing the sunroof gears. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Monk's Motors in Waterford at monks.com or at 248-681-8081.